You know, we're surrounded by AI that can do these absolutely incredible things. But doesn't it feel like something's missing? Like there's this fundamental piece of the puzzle that we just can't find? Well, in this explainer, we're going to go on a historical detective mission to find that exact missing link.
I mean, it's a frustration so many of us have felt, right? We have these billion-dollar algorithms that feel like pure magic, but then they often fail at simple, real-world understanding. They can see the world, sure, but they can't always comprehend it. So why is that?
Okay, this slide just perfectly illustrates the problem. As author Aydın Tiryaki points out, you point your phone at a TV hoping to identify the movie that's playing, and what does the AI do? It identifies the plastic frame or the manufacturer's logo instead. He calls this a shocking blindness to context in our intent, and honestly, he's spot on.
So where did we go so wrong? To answer that, we have to look back. Believe it or not, the clues to this whole mystery aren't in some high-tech lab of the future. They're actually buried in the digital cemetery that we all know as the Google graveyard. The two key pieces of evidence in our little investigation are two long-gone applications that you might even remember, PICASA and Google Goggles. Now, these weren't just old software. They represented a completely different philosophy, a whole different way of thinking about the relationship between us, the users, and AI. Let's start with our first clue, Google Goggles. Back in the early days of smartphones, this app felt like something straight out of science fiction. You could point your camera at the world, and it would tell you about it. But its real power, its real magic, wasn't just in what it told you. And this slide right here highlights the core, game-changing difference. Unlike today's visual search tools, which are basically a one-way street of information, Goggles was a dialogue. It was designed to learn directly from you. This personal story from the source it's everything. The author literally taught the AI the names of his local mountains, and Goggles remembered them. I mean, think about the power of that for a second. The AI wasn't just using some generic faceless data set. It was learning the user's specific street-level reality. Now, the technical term for this is supervised learning. The solution to AI's current limitations, as the author puts it, was right there. We could have had millions of users acting as voluntary teachers, labeling local plants, architecture, and cultural objects to create this incredibly rich and accurate data set. But that's not what happened. Instead, we got this fundamental shift. Google closed the door on this collaboration, and they demoted the user from a teacher and a data labeler to just a mere consumer of information. We went from being partners to just passive recipients. Okay, now for our second clue. This loss of user collaboration wasn't just limited to Goggles. A really similar thing happened with how we manage our data, thanks to an app called PICASA. For those of you who used it, you'll remember PICASA wasn't just a folder for photos. It was a tool for curation. You were actively organizing albums, tagging faces, and selecting the best shots. You were cleaning and structuring your own personal data sets without even realizing it. Then PICASA was replaced by cloud services like Google Photos, and we shifted from this idea of active curation to just passive storage. We stopped meticulously organizing, and we just started dumping everything into the cloud. And the result of that shift is profound. PICASA users were creating these perfect, high-quality sets of training data. By contrast, the billions of photos we have in the cloud today are largely a messy, noisy digital dump that AI really struggles to learn anything meaningful from. So when you put these two clues together, the lost teacher from Goggles and the lost curator from PICASA, a really clear picture starts to emerge. The problem isn't the technology, it's the whole philosophy behind it. And that brings us right back to the TV screen. Today's AI is fantastic at recognizing objects, a television, a car, a tree, you name it, but it completely fails at reading human intent, our desire to know about the movie, not the television it's playing on. So what did we lose when these apps disappeared? Well, we lost the ability to teach an AI where to look and what's important to us. We lost training data that was based on the real, lived experiences of users. And ultimately, we lost the potential for the deep contextual answers that we're all still hoping for. The source argues that by rejecting the user as a partner, tech giants actually created the very problems we see today. The context-blind, sometimes hallucinating AI is a direct result of this lost collaboration. They chose to believe their algorithms could solve everything, and they completely ignored the wisdom of the actual user. This final thought from the author just says it all. We have built this powerful set of eyes, but we've neglected to connect them to a wise mind. And it leaves us with a critical question, doesn't it? What could AI become if we, the users, were invited back in, not as consumers, but as its teachers?
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. I mean, if you are paying any attention at all to the technology world right now, you know we are just saturated in the AI revolution.
Completely. Yeah.
Models are writing code, they're creating art, they are rewriting the rules of the digital world almost daily.
It really does feel like warp speed. And yet that breakneck pace makes the central paradox we're talking about today all the more, well, glaring, frankly.
Exactly. Here's the paradox we're diving into. Why do these billion-dollar state-of-the-art visual AIs, you know, the ones powering Google Lens or image generators, why do they still suffer from what one of our sources calls a shocking blindness when they try to understand the visual world? Despite all the progress, they're still, quote, crawling instead of running.
That is the core tension. It's so strange. We've managed to crack language and context with large models. But when it comes to sight, I mean, real contextual sight, understanding human intent, the systems just feel so brittle.
So our mission today is a bit of technological archaeology. We are unpacking a really fascinating theory. It claims the root of this context-blind AI isn't some new complex problem, but actually two massive opportunities that were abandoned a decade ago.
And these were tied up in two discontinued Google apps from the early 2010s, PICASA and Google Goggles.
Right.
And the argument is powerful. By abandoning these tools, the tech giants made this fundamental and costly shift. They basically demoted the user from a teacher who was actively instructing the AI.
To what we are now, just a consumer.
Exactly, just a consumer passively generating mountains of messy data. So we're exploring how that lost collaboration might be the missing link for today's smart but not wise visual AI.
It's such an interesting premise that the solution was simpler and more human than we thought. Okay, so let's unpack the problem first. What's the most straightforward evidence we have that modern AI really lacks understanding?
Well, the proof is actually incredibly simple, and it all comes down to that difference between basic recognition and complex human intent.
Okay.
The source uses a perfect everyday example, Google Lens.
The feature on your phone, you point your camera at something to identify it.
Precisely. So if you point Lens at a television screen, what do you think the algorithm prioritizes?
I'm guessing the TV itself, the plastic frame, the brand name.
Exactly right. It successfully identifies the physical object, the bezel, the plastic, the TV brand. It recognizes the simplest, most commercially sellable thing in the picture.
The commodity.
But what is it failing to do? It fails completely at reading your intent.
Right. I wasn't asking about the TV. I wanted to know about the movie that's playing on the TV.
The AI just cannot deduce that obvious context. It doesn't get that this user is interested in the content, not the container.
That distinction is just. It's profound. It's optimized for an economy of objects, so it can show you where to buy another TV. But it has zero comprehension of the human curiosity behind it.
And let's take that a step further. You pointed at a meal you just cooked. What does it see?
Plate, food, table.
Right. But it misses the whole culinary story. It can't tell you that it's a specific regional dish, or that you might want the recipe, or that this dish is important because your grandmother made it. It sees the generic noun, but misses the human story completely.
So AI operates in a world without human interest or meaning. It sees the vessel, not the content, the commodity, not the culture. And that is the fundamental weakness.
And that inability, the sources argue, stems directly from neglecting the best teacher we have. You, the user.
That sets the stage perfectly for the first lost opportunity. Google Goggles. I remember that app. It felt like actual magic in the early smartphone days.
It was magical. But the source argues its real monumental value wasn't in the information it provided to you.
But in the information you could have provided to it.
That's the switch. That's the key.
So how does that work, technically, in terms of like AI training?
It's a concept called supervised learning, but let's just think about it in human terms. Normally, the AI guesses what something is, and we check its answer against some big pre-labeled database. Supervised learning, in the Goggles model, was the opposite. The system would basically say, I don't know what this is. And the user would provide the correct answer, the ground truth. in real time.
So the user becomes the authority for all this data that the system can't find in its global database.
Exactly. Instead of just passively accepting the algorithm's answer, you could manually step in and teach something specific, hyper-local, that only a person on the ground could possibly know.
Okay, that sounds a little abstract, so let's use that anecdote from the source. The one about the mountains.
It's the perfect story. A user pointed their phone from their terrace at 3 distinct mountains on the horizon. Goggles had no idea what they were.
Just generic mountains.
Right. So the user took the time to manually teach Goggles the specific local names of those mountains one by one.
They were labeling their own physical geography for the algorithm.
Precisely. And the system stored that human-verified, localized context. So later, when the camera was pointed that way again, Goggles recognized those mountains by the exact names the user provided. And it wasn't just nature. The source says Goggles recognized the user's grandfather's old historic house from all 3 sides after being taught just once.
Think about that. The solution to AI's blindness, its inability to get local nuance, was right there on a terrace, teaching it the names of 3 mountains.
The missed opportunity is just monumental. Imagine if Google had utilized millions of users as voluntary, passionate data labelers.
Yeah.
People could have entered details about native plants, local architecture, cultural objects, things no satellite mapper or web scraper could ever get.
Yeah.
It would have created this massive, flawless, crowdsourced data set of lived reality.
But hold on, let me play devil's advocate here. Wasn't that data just incredibly messy, hard to standardize? A million people are all labeling things differently. Isn't shifting to clean, professionally labeled stock photos just a rational business decision?
That is the core question. It's that conflict between scale and quality. And yes, it was messier, but the value of that messy human data was its authenticity, its context. The tech giants chose quantity millions of easy-to-scrape photos over quality millions of human-verified data points. They just went for the lowest common denominator of data.
So by shuttering Goggles, they didn't just close an app. They closed the door on the human ability to shape the data. And now our AI is trained on stock photos instead of the reality of the streets.
They made that critical decision. They demoted the user from teacher to consumer. And that philosophical retreat is what we are paying for today.
Which explains how we lost the teacher in the field. But the same shift happened inside our own photo libraries, right? Let's talk about the second piece, PICASA. I used that for years. It was Google's desktop tool for organizing your photos before everything went to the cloud.
And PICASA was the environment of what the source calls active curation. And that is the polar opposite of where we are now with cloud storage.
Okay, so contrast those 2 models for us. Active curation versus passive storage.
PICASA, because it was a local tool, it required you to be active. You were invested, you filtered your photos, you edited them, you tagged faces, you grouped them into folders, you even made gift CDs.
Right. You were cleaning the data yourself.
You were applying a human valuation layer.
Yeah.
You were showing the system what was important and what wasn't.
Yeah.
But then PICASA was killed off, and everyone was pushed to Google Photos. We shifted to passive storage. The billions of photos uploaded to the cloud today, blurry duplicates, screenshots, 50 versions of the same sunset.
It's what the source calls a digital dump.
That's the phrase. And the consequence is the quality of data available for AI training just plummeted.
Right.
The signal-to-noise ratio cratered.
So now AI is forced to learn from this incredibly noisy data. Oceans of unsorted, poorly tagged images with no human context applied to them.
Exactly. Think about the difference. In PICASA, if you tagged a photo of your brother as brother, that was a high-confidence, human-verified label. In the cloud, the AI has to guess who that is, and it learns from millions of photos where it might be right, but it also might be wrong.
The PICASA users, the ones actively curating, they were the best possible instructors. They were teaching the AI value and relevance.
Yeah. They were showing it which photos mattered enough to organize and which were just junk, destined for the trash.
If Goggles trained the AI on what to see in the world, PICASA trained it on what to value in the archive.
And both were these crucial acts of human collaboration that we've just
Yeah.
lost.
And you can see the cost of that now, right? Especially with generative models. They can create a technically perfect image, but it feels wrong, uncanny, because they learn from an ocean of junk data that a human never vetted.
The AI learned to reproduce the noise, not the intention. It trained on the general output of billions of passive consumers, not the focused input of millions of active teachers.
Okay, so let's summarize the cost of this lost collaboration. We have context-blind AI because tech giants rejected the wisdom of the human in the field and the archivist at home.
Absolutely. The source points to 3 specific benefits we lost when the logic of goggles and PICASA was shelved. First, users would have spent years teaching the AI exactly where to look.
Meaning the AI would learn human priorities, like
Yeah.
focusing on the movie, not the TV frame.
Correct. Second, the AI would have been trained in the genuine reality of the streets, all the chaos, the local nuance, the cultural specificity, not just in a sterile lab with generic stock photos, which are often, incredibly biased.
And the third and most frustrating loss.
We would be getting deep, contextual, accurate answers today. Instead of the generic, general responses we so often get, we get the name of the film, not just TV brand. We know the history of that house.
This whole failure seems rooted in what the source calls an arrogance, this belief that our algorithms can solve everything, that the messy human effort of curation and teaching was expendable.
That arrogance led to a huge miscalculation. They replaced dedicated human teachers with automated algorithms, thinking scale alone would solve for context. It didn't. The hallucinating, context-blind AI we have today is the direct result of that choice.
They traded high-quality, high-effort data for low-quality, high-volume data.
That's it, in a nutshell.
It's just fascinating that the key to unlocking AI's real understanding wasn't some new chip, but a commitment to collaboration that we already had in the first generation of smartphone apps.
Yeah.
The technology in our hands sees, but because of these decisions made a decade ago, it doesn't fully understand.
And that leads to a much broader and maybe a little provocative thought we want to leave you with.
Okay.
The source focused on 2 types of human contribution: hyper-local knowledge, like the names of mountains, and discerning human intent, like caring about the movie. So if those are the key things AI is missing, think bigger.
What other critical, hyper-localized, and contextual human data is AI still completely missing out on because these systems prefer passive data tasks over active human curation?
Data that can only be taught by engaged users. Things like emotional context, regional slang, local customs, neighborhood history.
Things an algorithm could never scrape from the noise of the cloud.
How much of the world's truly interesting, valuable knowledge is still locked away in human heads, totally inaccessible to these systems? That's definitely something to mull over the next time an algorithm tells you exactly what you didn't want to know.